Parasocial relationships are a phenomenon that's been studied since about the 1950s when it comes to traditional media like anchors in TV news and also in radio. It's basically started as a marketing and communications phenomenon. Like we actually do in podcasting, if I'm looking into the camera, if I'm talking to the audience, if I can give them the perception that they're in mind and I'm speaking to them, it leads an audience to feel engaged and to start developing what's called parasocial relationship. I don't know if you're familiar with like the parody Anchorman, but he has that phrase at the end of every time he closes a show. It's like, stay classy, San Diego. Like he's talking directly to the audience, builds this trust with him. So people tune in. When there's high competition between personalities and presenters, then we want to build a little bit of that connection with the audience. It started to lead more and more to the marketing teams behind various productions to say, you should give a little bit more information about you personally. You should tell the story, but then you should have a personal remark about it. So starting to build an audience perception of authenticity and trust. And ultimately, it's really leading to in this setting in terms of marketing is having purchase intent. The more I know this person, the more I identify with them, I kind of trust them. And so I'll become a loyal viewer. So all these little interactions, they're called parasocial interactions. When I say listeners at home or when Ron Burgundy says, stay classy, San Diego, those build up over time. The presenter is sending a one-to-many message to all of the audience, but the intention is for the person at home to start to perceive a one-to-one connection. And a parasocial relationship is when these interactions build up and the audience member starts to have a unilateral, so it's one way, but a sense of a dynamic social and psychological connection with the presenter. So we see this in talkback radio, having people call in, having a limited interaction, but feeling connected to the show. So things like, long-time listener, first-time caller. But it's really relevant when it comes to social media influencers. The way that they show that in this show is where we're kind of led to think that Belle and Miller have an established relationship. And we see a lot of their interaction where Belle is commenting on Miller's posts online, liking things, like referring to her as babes the whole time, setting up this like connection between the two of them. And then partway through the series, when Belle meets Miller for the first time face to face, the audience is kind of surprised. That interesting setup of actually this whole time where Belle has been following and admiring and feeling connected to Miller, but the whole time Miller doesn't really know who Belle is. Social media is kind of really influential in this way, in that, or different from traditional media, because there is this perceived interaction where I could have a parasocial relationship with someone on social media and they might like my comments, they might repost them. All of that is going to build up my sense of relationship and connection to them. But ultimately, I have more of a connection to them than they have to me.
I was just thinking about what that means in terms of building trust. So in the context of the kind of health decisions that people are making and the trust that they have in these wellness influencers, that kind of parasocial relationship is very key to that trust. And trust is a very strong driver, one of the strongest drivers in how people make decisions about their healthcare. It can be very dangerous if it's used in the wrong way.
This example is particularly negative, but broadly speaking, it's not a negative phenomenon. 51% of people have at least one parasocial relationship. And in social media, well, I can connect with people that I really do have real world relationships with in the same platform that I can connect with people that I don't personally know in the same kind of ways and have access to them. And we know through research on parasocial relationships that influencers use different platforms to kind of drip feed information about themselves. How realistic it is questionable. But with Belle and a range of other influencers, there's this perception of this is one of my peers. This is someone who's gone through what I'm going through or what a person I care about is going through. And I think we'll touch on this later, so I won't go into detail about, where people want to get trusted information. But I will say that the research on parasocial relationships says they don't develop between a person and someone talking on a topic that the person who forms the parasocial relationship wasn't already interested in. They're going out to seek that community. They're going out to look for where have they been maybe marginalized. There's a bunch of research that shows how important parasocial relationships have been for different marginalized groups, where you're not seeing in your own community folks who look like you, folks who have had experiences that you've had. And so it can be really protective. Like, there's a lot of research that shows it builds social support in the absence of real world support. Belle wasn't getting the social support from her networks that she might have otherwise gotten.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jazz. And I think I'm conscious that I made that comment before about it, those wellness influences, it being potentially dangerous, that level of trust that people can have. And that really comes from the type of message that the influencer's giving around health. And I guess an example of that is looking at the type of treatment that Miller chose to have, and sort of emotion being involved in a lot of that as well. When people enter into these relationships, they're going into it in good faith that the people that they're engaging with are giving them, good advice, and they can trust that person. And that's where the danger is.
A couple of things that are interesting from the parasocial relationship, external to influencers. The spaces where people start to form parasocial relationships tend to be around beauty and wellness, and most often influencers, gamers, actors, singers, and athletes. And interestingly, it don't have to be human. There can be animal influencers or animal profiles on social media that folks really get a sense that they start to know this animal and are connected with this animal. But also fictional characters. So research has pretty consistently shown that folks will develop parasocial relationships with characters that they connect with, that they have a sense of social connection, and that it makes them feel, I guess, seen. And the kinds of questions in surveys, if we're trying to assess whether someone has developed a parasocial relationship, is true or false, or how likely we agree with things like, occasionally I wonder if X is similar to me or not. For me, X could be the perfect partner. If I knew X in real life, I'd trust them completely. So obviously that's really concerning with the things the group has raised here, right? And if I knew X in real life, I could disclose positive thoughts about myself honestly and fully. And so there's a continuum we're talking about here. But I mean, I'm not going to ask you to necessarily disclose, but I know that there's fictional characters or folks who I've thought, I get a real sense that I know them and I just trust them and want to buy that product. I've been a bit of an Apple product fangirl for about 15 years, and I can put that down to Johnny Ive, the head of design. Apple led the way in having the designer of the company do ads where he spoke about what he was passionate about and the technology behind that. And they're all up close shots. He's very charming, very good looking man talking about product development. And I fully bought into that. This is a boutique product. This is something that they really care about. It's artisanal. Of course, we know now that's not the case. Or if we know the show Parks and Rec, Ben, who ends up with Leslie, I would be friends with Ben. I know I have a parasocial relationship. I see this character and I think Ben would be a great friend. I would have a drink with him. So, of course, not all people develop these, but I've always found this a really interesting topic, and was interesting to see that come out for better or worse in this show. I do want to kind of finish out that part before we move on by saying, if you're interested in this kind of topic and also thinking about when that relationship breaks down, because that's ultimately what's happened here, right? Belle had deceived and broken a relationship and a trust with a lot of people who cared a lot about her and the things that she was talking about. The light-hearted version of that is this book. There's a chapter in here that's called "This Sandwich is Morally Problematic, but it's also delicious. Can I still eat it?" That's actually by the writer of Parks and Rec and various other TV shows. And what happens when you have a fandom or an interest in someone who ends up morally letting you down. For a much more serious deep dive that I think is pretty important at the moment is this one. Claire Dederer, Monsters, What We Do with Great Art by Bad People. There's a whole chapter on fandom and about the commercialization of your fandom to buy a product. And I picked this book up because I wanted to know how to have conversations and think about artists who I had previously valued who, through the Me Too movement, turned out to be folks that I no longer wanted to be interested in or enjoy their art anymore. So thank you, team.
Yeah.